So I bought 42 houses all in the same neighborhood, all in one deal a few years ago. And I had this grand plan, this layout of how things were going to go, how it was going to work out. I even shot a couple YouTube videos on it predicting how things were going to go. And that's not what happened. This deal went south pretty quickly. I think we ended up salvaging it, but a lot more went wrong than went right. And I learned a ton. So I want to take some time out for this video to recap this deal, talk about how I was able to buy and fund 42 rental houses in the same neighborhood with none of my own money, then talk about how the plan went sideways several different ways, how we kind of made the pieces fit, and what the deal looks like now after it's refinanced and fully done. If you appreciate transparency, hit that like button. So this deal came across our plate in early 2020 before the pandemic hit. This was a tired landlord. He was in his upper 70s, and over the past 30 years, he had been buying these houses in the same neighborhood for the past 30 years. He bought 5 or 10 at first and then had slowly been buying them over time, and he owned 42 houses of about 100 houses in the neighborhood. I already owned about 5 rentals in the neighborhood, so I knew it was a perfect place to own rental properties. It's located in Wentzville, Missouri, which happens to be the town that I live in, which is a really nice up-and-coming city on the suburbs of St. Louis. This is actually a little bit rougher of a neighborhood, but in a great school district and in a great area. Part of the reason it's a little bit rough is because about 90% of the houses in there are rental houses, and not everybody has standards that we have when we own rental properties. And our goal was to change that. The gentleman wanted $3.5 million for the deal. At that time, we didn't have enough money to buy the deal. So we offered him some seller financing terms with a little bit of money down, explained to him that he could save money on taxes if we paid him a little bit every year over the next 5 or 10 years, but he wasn't having any of it. He wanted $3.5 million right now because he didn't know how long he was gonna live, and he knew that if he passed away, his sisters, because he didn't have any kids, his sisters would sell them for pennies on the dollar just to get some money. So he wanted $3.5 million now. We didn't have the funding. We didn't have the capabilities to take it on, so we just kind of let it go. Flash forward about 18 months, so early 2022, the deal came back across our plates. We went to re-engage with the seller, and he still wanted $3.5 million, which, considering what had happened over the previous 18 months, really caught our attention because the houses had gone up in value probably 20 or 25%. If anybody was paying attention, back after the pandemic, house prices absolutely skyrocketed. Now they've kind of leveled off since then, but they're a lot higher than they were. So we saw this as a deal that we were going to try to put together because there was so much perceived equity in the deal, and he still wanted his $3.5 million. Let me tell you how we funded the deal, then I'll tell you this weird caveat that we had to have in the contract, and then we'll get into all of our ups. As I said, he wanted $3.5 million, which is about $83,000 a door. Now, the houses did need work. However, we didn't know how much work that they needed. This is kind of that weird caveat that I was just talking about. He only wanted us to get into 5 houses before we committed to the deal. We are going to have to be okay with not getting inside 37 houses and still doing the deal. We weren't huge fans of that, so we settled in the middle. We said we would view the 5 houses, and then we would put $50,000 of non-refundable money into the deal and then get in the other properties because he did not want to scare all the tenants. As we talked about, it is a small community, 100 houses. He owns a majority of them. If it got out that he was selling and it didn't go through, which had happened in the past to him, he didn't want to have to deal with that. So we ended up settling on that. We put down 50 grand, walked into the 5 houses, we picked them, so it was random. A few of them were in really good shape, a few of them were a little bit rough, and one of them was really bad. He told us that that was about what we were going to get on the other 37 houses. Now, he was probably what you consider a slumlord. When tenants moved out, he painted, put in new carpet, and that was it. He would spend a couple grand on a turn, where we would probably spend 5 or 10 grand on a turn. So after we saw the 5 houses, put the 50 grand down, visited all the other 37 houses, we were comfortable enough to do the deal. Now, we weren't able to put huge scopes of work on each property, which is one of the mistakes we'll talk about later. So we decided that we were thinking we were going to spend about 500 grand on the repairs. So if you're doing the math, we needed $3.5 million to buy it and $500,000 worth of repairs. So we needed to raise $4 million. What we did was we got an 80% loan on the purchase price only from a small local bank. So a small local bank gave us a loan for $2.8 million or 80%. Now the other $700,000 for the purchase plus the additional $500,000 came from a private money lender. So we got a $1.2 million loan from a private money lender, and it was one person. Quick funny story, the person that lent us the money on this deal was actually a former student of mine. It was a student that lived down in Florida. He got into my program, bought 35 rentals, which is pretty cool, but he also owned a software company and just sold it and had some extra cash, and he reached out to me and said, hey, if you're looking to deploy a few $1,000,000, I'd be willing to look at a deal and partner with you on it, or just be the lender. So I ended up calling him, meeting him over Zoom, pitching him the entire project, and he committed to $1.2 million, which is really cool, which again, not everybody's gonna have access to that right away, but eventually you will. If you're out networking and talking to people, you will run across people with money. So that was really cool. A former student ended up actually being the lender on this deal. All right, now here's where things start to go south. We had all the money lined up, we closed on the properties, and now we owned 42 houses and inherited 42 tenants. A majority of these houses were rented between $700 and $800 a month, while market rent was $1,300 to $1,500 a month. Now here's where it can get kind of dicey. We couldn't just kick all the tenants out, and we didn't have the manpower to do all the rehabs at one time anyway. We wanted to do a few at a time over a couple year period so that we could do the rehabs in an efficient manner and then raise rents once the properties were rehabbed. Everything started off pretty smoothly, but we quickly realized that we did not raise near enough money. Then we ended up going to that same small local bank and got an additional $300,000. So we were now $1 million into the rehab. We had rehabbed a little over half of the properties. This all happened in about a 15 to 18 month period. We saw that we still had about 10 more properties to rehab, and we ran out of money. We ended up having to use about $500,000 of our own money in this deal, which is something that strapped all of our businesses because we have money in bank accounts, we have money set aside for taxes and reserves and all the things, and we had to tap into a large portion of that to finish this deal. So now we are using our own cash, and now we really wanted to get this deal done. Flash forward about 2 years, so earlier in 2024, we finally finished all the projects. Unfortunately, interest rates had gone up a ton, and we did not even account for the fact that while we had several vacant units, we were not going to be collecting cash flow. So our biggest mistake in this was cash flow management. We didn't raise enough money on the initial onset because we did not do the proper scopes, and we did not account for the fact that we would not be collecting, several $1,000s in rent over several months while we were doing a lot of these rehabs. So we were just scrounging together, and we were just pulling cash and going back and begging money for the private lender, like I said, in the bank, and our own cash to finally cobble this deal together. So earlier this year in 2024, the project was finally complete. We needed to get an appraisal from the bank and take out a new loan, unfortunately at a higher interest rate, to pay off the original loan from the bank and pay off the private lender their money plus interest. Now here's where the deal worked out pretty well. The properties ended up appraising for $7 million, and we got a 75% loan of $5.25 million on that appraisal. The best part about this deal, and kind of the only part about this deal that I really like at this point, is we added about $2 million net to our portfolio and added $7 million gross to our portfolio. Now we took that $5.25 million, we paid off our initial bank loan plus the extra money we got from the bank, our initial private lender loan plus the extra money we got from our private lender, and we were pretty much capped out. There was no money left over. In fact, we maybe had to come to the table with 10 or 20 grand to make everybody whole. But it was done. We had most of the properties rehab, a couple of them were in really good shape. So we now own 42 houses in a really good area that don't cash flow as much as you think because of the extra money we have in the deal, but we're cash flowing a little bit. We'll cash flow more over time as we raise rents, as rents go up. And then the tenants will continue to pay down that $5 million note. And 15 years from now, it'll be worth about $15 million, and we'll probably only owe about $5 million. So the long-term vision of this is going to turn out very well. It's just not quite turning out how we thought it would, considering we're idiots and we bought 42 houses in one neighborhood without really knowing what we were doing. That's been the secret sauce to our success, is go all in, figure it out as you go. Most of the times it's worked out. Sometimes it hasn't worked out in the short term, but in the long term, and a few times it hasn't worked out at all. But I think that's just the price you pay to grow and scale. If you want to learn from my mistakes, because I make a ton of them, I got 2 quick things for you to do. The first thing is check out the description. You're going to see a free private training there. Also a free 7-day trial to my Deal Pilot system. It is a system that comes with software to help you use AI and find deals. It comes with weekly training videos and weekly coaching calls. Also resources to connect you with funding sources that will fund 100% of your deal, as well as a ton of other resources. So check out the description for those 2 things. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you can learn from all my mistakes. Hit that notification bell. See you on the next one.